how many of these things actually happened? Today's video, we will look at Mafia vs. reality. And first up, it is all about who got to decide. In movies, there is a distinct hierarchy in the Mafia. If you make your way to the top, then you are essentially God. The other mobsters do not get to say anything. They simply do what they are told. In reality, this would be impossible. There were 500 or so members in Cosa Nostra in America. This meant that each family had its own government. There was no supreme leader. Each boss would have his own council. But they would have to work together with other families if they wanted to expand their criminal empire. They did not always see eye to eye, but it was necessary. And the bosses often had to negotiate instead of just giving orders. In the Godfather movie, Michael Corleone makes a decision that all business with the drug dealers will go through the family. Now, this sounds like a great idea to make some serious money, but it could never have happened. Why? Because the drug trade was not controlled by one group back in the day. It was a free-for-all. You could not join the Mafia and then start dealing with drugs without knowing anything about it. Now, you had to start from the bottom and work your way up. If the Godfather had ordered this change, he would have been laughed out of the room by his own men. The next myth is about someone very famous. Did Vito Corleone really exist? Vito Genovese is believed by some to be the real-life Vito Corleone. He was a member of the Mafia Commission, and he became the boss of the Genovese crime family in 1934. He kept his power for the rest of his life, and he died in 1969. Now, while he was the most powerful mobster in the country, he did not come from Italy. He came from Canada. He was born in 1897 in Canada to Italian immigrant parents. His father was a barber, so he was not poor. He grew up with 3 brothers and a sister. They were a normal family, but Charles left home when he was 14 years old, joined a gang of thieves, turned into a mobster, and eventually made his way to become a capo regime for the Mafia. We know that much about him, but he was not much like Vito Corleone. Vito Corleone was a fictional character. He was based on several real-life mobsters, but we believe that Mario Puzo, the author of The Godfather, based Vito Corleone on Lucky Luciano, Joe Masseria, and Frank Castellano. While Vito Genovese was a powerful mobster, he was not an Italian war hero. There is no evidence of this or even that he knew how to read or write, so it is safe to say that Vito Corleone was indeed a work of fiction. Another thing you might not know is that women were never accepted in the Mafia. Okay, not exactly true. Women were allowed to be in the Mafia, but only as girlfriends or wives of mobsters. They were not accepted as full members. For example, there was Carolyn Giannattasio, who was the wife of a Mafia captain. When her husband was arrested, she took over the family business and became one of the most powerful female mobsters ever. She also became known as the Godmother. Now, in reality, she was only a Mafia princess, which is why she is not considered a real mobster. However, there were cases where females were accepted into the organization as full members. These were typically the wives of mobsters who were killed or sent to prison. Since they were now widows, they needed to take care of themselves and their children. So the Mafia accepted them as members. They could run illegal gambling operations and brothels. And sometimes they were even bodyguards to high-ranking members. Now, even though they were part of the Mafia, they still had to listen to the men. They could not talk or negotiate like the men. Their job was simply to do what they were told and stay quiet. Speaking of wives, you probably think that mobsters hide their money with their wives. Does that happen? Well, yes, but it is usually not the wives they trust. Instead, they trust other mobsters. This is because the police would often question the wife of a mobster. This is a tactic that has worked well in the past. Sometimes the wife of a mobster would crack under pressure and reveal where the money was hidden. That is why mobsters prefer to hide their money with someone else, someone they can trust, someone who is just as untouchable as they are. As for the wives, they are normally used as pawns in negotiations. Did you know that there are 5 families in New York? This is another common misconception. There is more than 5 families. Back in the early days, there were dozens of crime families, but they were all rivals. There was no peace among them. Things began to change in the 1920s when a bunch of these families met together and created what would later become known as La Cosa Nostra, the American Mafia. The 5 founding families were the Bonanno crime family, the Colombo crime family, the Gambino crime family, the Genovese crime family, and the Lucchese crime family. Now, these 5 families were the most powerful ones, but there were other families who were just as dangerous. Over the years, the 5 families' alliance got weaker and weaker until it meant nothing at all. Another myth is that mobsters only kill people. Not quite. Murder is bad for business, and while mobsters are capable of killing anyone, they would much rather use other methods. For example, they would often kidnap someone and demand money for their return. Or they would set up a fake business and swindle people out of their money. There were also plenty of mobsters who made their money through unions. They would infiltrate unions and then use their influence to get the best paid jobs. They also had control over hiring and firing decisions, which meant they could get kickbacks from every employee. There were also mobsters who ran illegal lotteries. They would bribe politicians to allow them to run the lottery, and since the politicians were getting paid, no one was willing to stop them. Even today, the Mafia makes more money through racketeering than through murder. We have said that mobsters are dangerous, but it is true. What mobster do you think is the most dangerous? Let us know in the comments section down below. And speaking of danger, it was not uncommon for mobsters to be arrested. What happens to their families? Normally, the family of a mobster is put under witness protection. They are moved to another state and given new identities. If they refused, then they would be killed. Most of the time, the family has no choice but to accept the offer. They don't want to live in fear forever. And besides that, they do not belong in the Mafia lifestyle. Once a mobster is arrested, the family has already suffered enough. Next, let's look at the role of the police. The police hated mobsters, but it was hard to prove any crimes against them. This is why they often had to rely on the Mafia turning on itself. If there was a big fight between 2 families, then the police had a chance. Of course, there were cases where the police arrested mobsters without any help. They would arrest mobsters for illegal possession of guns or for illegal betting. But if they wanted to put away a mobster for good, they needed evidence of a major crime. This is where informants came in. Informants were either mobsters who betrayed their own kind or people who had nothing to do with the Mafia, but who got caught up in it. For example, there was a man named Joseph Velassi, who was a soldier in the Genovese crime family. One day, he decided to become an informant for the FBI, and even though he was protected, he was killed by order of the Genovese crime family. Now, lastly, it is about making money. Do mobsters really make as much money as they show in the movies? Not really. While mobsters are dangerous and are feared by most people, they are not billionaires. Most of the time, they earn a modest income. Some might earn around $100,000 a year. Others might earn more, but certainly not enough to be considered rich. See, being a mobster is not about making money. It is about respect. If you want to make money, then there are better ways to do that. With that being said, the most successful Mafia family ever was the Gambino crime family. They were led by Carlo Gambino. He made millions of dollars through hijacking cargo shipments. He also owned casinos in Cuba, and he earned a lot of money from gambling. His net worth is estimated to have been around $500 million. That is why Carlo Gambino is considered to be the richest mobster of all time. I'll meet the man who brought down the Mafia.